I believe God's talking to World Revival Church. How about you? You know, sometimes we're asking, what's the next step? God, how are you taking us to our destiny, right? Anybody think that? I think that. I lie in bed every night thinking about God. I think I see a little bit about what you want to do up here, but how do we get there? How do we get there? If you don't have that passion, I pray that you begin to get it in the night. Maybe you could feel that stirring. You know, God's trying to take us somewhere, but to go somewhere, you gotta find a way to get there. So how do you get there? What do you do? I remember my friend David Killingsworth's here tonight, and he took me with him to the Scottish Hebrides Islands there as a treat of my life. And we sat in the home of one of the men that was in the revival there in 1949. And he began to tell the stories about how they prayed and how God moved. And out there in the front of his house was this old anvil sitting there. And I don't know, I didn't ask him, but I think it was the anvil that his father, who was one of the leaders in the revival, his father, who was the one who prayed, and when he prayed, the very house that they were meeting had shifted off its foundation. And this man was a blacksmith, and he would make things with metal and this anvil, and he would weep and cry before the Lord. And the tears would fall down and sizzle on the anvil as he was praying and crying out for God to move. I remember a few years ago, I went down to the Argentina there, and the men and women began to talk to me about how they prayed. They prayed for breakthrough for the people that are far from God, the people that are in the occult, that somehow there would be a warring spirit of God that would come in and rip open the heavens, and these people who were far from God could come to know the Lord. And as they learned to pray, as they learned to warfare, somehow the heavens would rend in multitudes, tens of thousands would come to the Lord. One of them looked at me at one time and said, well, it's not hard to get people to come to the Lord. You just serve some food and invite them and they'll come to the Lord. I wish it worked that way here. Men and women, though, crying out, trying to figure out the next step. What is it for us here? I think I got something I want to share with you about this. I'm not going to go long. John struggled with trying to give people direction and purpose. And tonight we're going to look at 1 John chapter 3. But you know, it's not always easy. You're trying to figure out the next step. Where do we go? How do we pray? How do we stand? How do we build this? How do we cry out? And sometimes what our instincts are not always the right ones. Sometimes what our religion has impressed upon us is not the things that we need to do. And moreover, just like in Israel, when they went through the wilderness and they tried to gather up too much manna or yesterday's manna, it would stink. And the problem is we keep trying to conduct a new move of God like it's an old move of God. All these books I've bought over the years of men that tell me what a move of God is, but they don't know what a move of God is. And the same people that celebrate old moves of God would have defied them and rejected them in their own day, because new moves of God don't come in ways we always understand and comprehend. Every time there's a new move of God, it shakes up things. When Azusa Street hit and they started speaking in tongues, the holiness people said, "What is this? Why are people speaking in gibberish?" People started falling down later on in some of the charismatic renewal. Why do people need to fall down? Over the last few years, I've got to know Randy Clark a little bit, a great man of God. Started a revival in Toronto. And all the people that were so mean to him, because the joy of the Lord came upon people and they started laughing. God forbid if we ever laughed in church. When new moves of God come, people go, "What is this? I don't know what this is. How come it couldn't have been like the move of God I'm already used to?" And then we try to figure out how to get there, and I'm not sure we always know how to get there. But I believe John was wrestling with some of this in his own church, and I want to share a little bit of what he had to say. Just a few more minutes. I'm not going to go long. Here's what John said. I'm in 1 John 3:18. He said this, My dear children, let's not just talk about love, but let's practice real love. So we say, love, I don't want to hear about love. That's not what I need. One of the problems with some of us is we start end up being like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We're going to start telling Jesus what he needs to say and do. Just get up and people say, well, I'm beyond that. Give me something deep, J.D. Give me something deep. You start missing this here because the problem is we're trying to build this thing over here or whatever, and then we forget that there's some fundamentals here. Love, I don't want to hear about love. Well, I think you're missing the heart of the gospel then. John says this. He's trying to tell them how to get a move of God. He's trying to tell them how to move forward. And they don't necessarily get it. But he says this, my dear children, let's not just talk about love. Let's not just put a banner up. Let's not just make it. Let's flesh it out. We want to see some embodied, self-sacrificing, messy, friction-based love. He says this is the only way we'll know we're living truly, living in God's reality. You say, what do you mean by that? I mean that without this kind of love, this powerful, ferocious, gigantic, explosive, generous, beautiful love, that we're not going to get what God's up to, that we're not going to be living in God's reality. He says this, it's also the way to shut down debilitating self-criticism. Ooh, now I'm starting to see. It's so easy when you start wanting to have a move of God to start getting into anxiety, to get into travail and self-deprecation and abasement and now it's suddenly about your performance. And you're not only down here weeping and wailing about how much you've messed things up, but you're out here judging everybody else in the room too. And you go, oh God, why don't you bring revival? Because you think revival is going to come by pulling out your scorecard, by coming up and getting involved with your debilitating self-criticism. You think if you just abase yourself enough, God's going to move. And I want to tell you that that's not how it works. See, sometimes the problem with some of us is we're trying to take a shower before God gives us a bath. You say, JD, are you against holiness? Absolutely not. We've got to have holiness. The question is, how do we really get it, though? People keep saying, well, we need to get holy to have a revival. How about we have a revival to get holy? Why do you think we need this? We're pretty lousy at this. We're anxious. We're self-absorbed. We're checking out our own life and we're comparing it to everybody else. And we think the move of God is about wailing and travailing and self-examination and self-exploration. Why don't you get your head out of your own life? That's what John's saying here. Getting this love is going to shut down debilitating self-criticism, even when there is something to it. You say, well, I'm just being honest. John's saying, why don't you just shut up for a while and quit going there? But I thought that's how I got revival. I thought it was by just abasing myself and just beating myself up and feeling really bad about all the things I've done wrong. I grew up in that kind of religion. I grew up when everybody had a beat-up paperback of Why Revival Tarries. And they prayed for revival, and they prayed for revival, and let me tell you something. Most of them never saw it. Most of them never saw God move because they got their head buried in a pew and they're out here evaluating their lives. They're nitpicking their kids. They're getting caught up in things that don't matter and they wonder where there's a move of God. For God is greater than our worried hearts. We don't get revival by overly drawing upon our worried hearts. We get revival by focusing on the God is greater. And He knows more about us than we do ourselves. Listen, guys, if we're going to start doing this by a scorecard, we're in trouble. If we're going to base this on morality, the Muslims have got us beat. The Mormons got us beat. Think about that for a minute. If we're going to base it on that, we're never going to have a move of God. John says, and friends, once that's taken care of, once you let that love come in, once you let that presence come in, once you let that reality come in, then we're no longer accusing or condemning ourselves. See, when you let the love of God come in on the level He's wanting to come, when you let that glory come in with the benevolence and beauty and light and supremacy of Jesus, when you let it come in, suddenly His beauty, His goodness, His holiness overwhelms us. And we're no longer accusing or condemning ourselves. There's so many, I grew up with the idea of revival was you condemn people enough till they feel bad enough and God will move. You know, what we need is a bunch of hard preaching where people just feel horrible. There's times for strong preaching. There's times for hard preaching. But that doesn't necessarily bring revival. Doesn't even necessarily bring long-term repentance. Not necessarily. John's talking to some people trying to have a future. And friends, once we've taken care of this, and we're no longer accusing or condemning ourselves, we're bold and free before God. I'm envisioning a day where World Revival Church, more than ever before, would be bold and free. But it's hard to do that when you come in here with your scorecard out. It's hard to do that when you're out here comparing yourself to someone else. It's hard to do this when you think, I've prayed for years, and who does this other person who just showed up think they are? It's hard to do that when we're evaluating ourselves to ourselves and to each other. It's hard to do this when we somehow miss the purpose here. The Passion Translation says it like this. Thanks, Stuart. My delightfully loved friends, when our hearts don't condemn us, we have a bold passion to speak face to face with God. A bold passion to speak face to face. See, John's given us some hints, given us direction. He goes on here to say we're able to stretch out our hands and received what we asked for because we're doing what He said, doing what pleases Him. So I say, yeah, and that, it sounds like you're going right back to it, J.D. We need to do all the stuff that pleases God. We need to go down and make sure we follow all the rules. John knew they thought like that, so he wanted to make sure they knew exactly what he meant. Again, this is God's command, and He only tells them two things. Some of you are going to have to learn how to just get the two things. You say, well, what about all this other stuff? How about we just get these two things and we'll worry about that later on? You say, how do we get revival? I think these two things right here will break open the door. Again, this is God's command. Number one, to believe in His personally named Son, Jesus Christ. The power of belief. We need to believe. We need to believe in Jesus. We need to trust Jesus. We need to be stirred by who He is, by His nature, by His purpose, by His name. We need to believe in Jesus. Not just confess His name, but believe in the depths of your soul. To feel who He is, to know who He is, to celebrate who He is, and to be reminded that He's at the centerpiece of everything. And John says this, and Jesus told us to love each other in line with the original command. 2 commands. 2. Only 2. Yeah, what about all the other stuff I like? Well, some of that's okay. Some of it's not. What about all that stuff I'm trying to make my kids do? How about this? What if we actually got people to really, really, really believe Jesus? Really believe Jesus. And we got them to radically love, sacrificially, the kind of love that digs the last $20 out of a pocket, the kind of love that puts up with people that no one wants to put up with, the kind of love that comes and goes and gives of itself, the kind of love that wants to pour itself into people, the kind of love that's not just got our eye up in heaven, but we're looking to the left and the right, because John knew that when all you do is creak your head up toward the sky, revival's never going to come. When all you do is just pray and cry out that way, and don't ever look this way, and don't ever let something in you come through you. Whenever you don't begin to understand that we were called to embody, to live. We were called to be the image bearers in creation. We were called to live. We were called to touch people, to speak to them, to live and be. And revival's going to come that way. It's not just a vertical reality, and that's where we miss it. It's not just you say, well, you know what? It doesn't matter whether I connect with anybody or not, because I'm a passionate worshiper. I'm a passionate prayer. Good for you. But you're never going to see revival. Not the way you think, anyway. See, what happens is we get into our religion. We get into our ways. We get into the things that please us. And we're up front with our self-examination. We're up front with our agonizing. We're up front pushing and doing what we do. And all along, God's saying, I want you to think again. I want you to listen again. I want you to see again. I'm shifting a whole new generation. I'm shifting a whole new group of people. And you've got to get this. John says, as we keep His commands are just the 2 you need to understand. Not all the extra ones we want to tag on. As we keep His commands and live deeply and surely in Him, and He lives in us. And then it says this. And this is how we experience His deep and abiding presence in us. You say, how do we get revival, J.D.? I don't have all the answers. Well, maybe we need to get it like they did in the Hebrides. Maybe so. Maybe we need to do like they did at Azusa Street and had all the prayer meetings. Maybe so. I don't have a problem with any of those things. But whatever we do, and however we do it, we've got to root ourselves into what God is really saying. Because here's something I want you to understand here. You're not too good, and you're not beyond the simplicity and the power of godly love. And you're not beyond needing to make that a value and let that become a part of your life. If you don't weep for people, if you're not burdened by people, if you won't stop and talk to people, then I don't know why God would ever send you revival. I want to say something here. I don't care how loyal you are. I don't care how long you raise your hands, and I don't care how many services you come to. If you don't love people, you are missing it. I'm telling you what, you're judging this on the wrong scorecard. And your job isn't to criticize people coming in new. Your job isn't to somehow make somebody that doesn't know how to do this and how to be this, to make them feel bad or to exclude them. We're supposed to be called with this magnificent love, this magnificent compassion. We're supposed to be filled with light and goodness and glory. Get your head out of everybody's behavior all the time. Look up. Look up. See the magnificence. See the beauty. See the glory. It's not going to do us any good in this house if we learn to sing hard. We learn to fall down, but we don't love. It's not going to do us any good if we don't get up off the floor and see somebody in the back whose marriage is about to fall apart. It doesn't do us any good if we're scoring this the wrong way. Just got a little bit more here. We're going to have some prayer warriors dig in the midst of all of you. We got a lot of men up here. We're just about done. I'm going to go back to what I started with here tonight. John said this: my dear children, let's not just talk about love. God's so tired of all our talk and all our songs, all our banners. Let's practice real love. This is the only way we'll know that we're truly living in God's reality. This is the only way. Somebody say, I want revival, J.D. I want to find this thing. Well, what if the ability to have this is already in our hands? What if the way to take this is already right here with us? And we're looking for something outside. We're looking for something beyond. We're looking for a special moment. We're looking for a special sermon. But what if it's just becoming who we were called to be? What if it's just grabbing hold of something more? Not too long ago, I was talking about love, and somebody said to me, well, J.D., that's what they preach over at the Abundant Life or one of those Baptist churches. We don't really need that. It just made me angry in my heart. Yeah, we're so beyond those people. We're so beyond them. We just got it all figured out, don't we? We're just so brilliant. Well, some of that love's humanistic and selfish and sloppy. Yeah, there's a lot of bad drivers out there too, and we don't stop driving. A lot of bad dads, we don't outlaw fatherhood. God is calling us to step up in this hour. I'm grateful for all these men that have stood up here during this whole sermon. Some of you wanted a shorter sermon. You ought to be thankful. Thank God for the worship team here tonight, bringing the truth. John and the whole team. We're getting ready to open up this altar here, but you know what? The reason why we don't have a revival is because we have a love problem and a belief problem. If we would get this figured out tonight, if you would let the love of God overtake you, the wonder and the beauty and the power, the love that transforms the nations, a love that turns our affections, a love that gives us the desire. Obligation is good. but it won't give you the long-term ability to stand. Loyalty and honor is good, but there's something about passion and love and joy and the wonder and glory of Jesus that takes you so much further. Some of you are looking for God in all the wrong places. What would happen tonight if you'd come running? Some of you guys that aren't wanting to get prayer or whatever up here, I want you to just kind of scoot and make a little bit of room for somebody else here. What would it look like for people to come running for love? What would it look like for somebody to grab hold of the ferocious, fierce, powerful, bloody love of God? You say, what do you mean by that? It's the kind of blood that Jesus shed on the cross and He died for you. It's the kind of love that parts the Red Sea. It's the kind of love that keeps coming toward you in spite of you. I'm not trying to make light of sin here tonight, friends. Sin is dreadful. It's awful. It's disastrous. It's destructive in every way. But I tell you something, there is a God who's filled with love and life in spite of our wretchedness, in spite of the ugliness and despair of our lives. There is a God who wants to awaken your soul, awaken your heart, to call you to a place you've never been. And the question is, do you really want this? Do you really want to move outside your religion? Do you want to stop making this about you and make it about Jesus? To make it about the Lord? To make it about the one who wants to come and touch the nations? There's a love that's unfathomable, a love that's transformative, a love that will break open the darkness, a love. And when we get that love, when we encounter that love, my friends, then revival will begin. Why don't we get our prayer warriors up here? We're getting ready to see an unleashing of love in this house. The beauty, the wonder, the joy, the power of God. And I want you to get bold and free. I want you to get your face up out of the dirt. I want you to get your eyes up to heaven. And tonight, God's going to begin to unleash some things like you've never experienced before. Lord, right now, I pray that everything would be broken off, that souls would be saved, that men and women would come and know you and feel you. Let it be in Jesus' name.